All right, hello. Welcome to kind of the next step in this whole process. If you were here with me earlier this week, if you saw the sort of replay, then you kind of got an idea of what bits you need to be able to start doing room correction. There are going to be a few more steps that I'm going to need to present to you guys to give you the background so that you can use those tools correctly, or at least the way that I found to be helpful. But I want to give those following along an opportunity to acquire as many of those bits as they can before I go into details about setting them up, so that as many people as possible will be able to follow along with me. I know that it takes a little while to get hardware and orders in. I know Amazon and maybe B&H and other places are slower at shipping. They're trying to prioritize delivery to goods and services that people need to kind of stay alive and healthy, which unfortunately some of this audio gear doesn't always fall into that category. So I'll start going into some of those details later on. I'm also interested in hearing from you on the thread in the comments. If you've got other specific questions about what we'll be doing and what the approach is and some of the reasoning behind it and all that kind of stuff. So happy to cover those things along the way. So this post is really an answer to a question that I saw that showed up in our group sometime last night about, like, is there a kind of push button way that I can just stick a microphone in front of my stereo system, record some kind of test signal, and then have magic happen that fixes the frequency or possibly frequency and time domain issues in the room, feeds that filter automatically into Roon, and I'm done. So kind of a one button approach to the whole thing. Unfortunately, as far as I know, anything like that exists. Some folks have used Anthem or Dirac or other things. And even if you've used some of those other things, you know that to get really good results, it takes a little bit more work than that. Dirac's measurement protocol typically has you take measurements from 9 different places and average them together, and that can take a while, especially if you have a lot of speakers in your system, not just a 2-channel system. All these things take some work to get something out of them. So, but unlike the kind of home theater paradigm where you just have this measurement mic that you stick in front of your system and it measures things and does all the stuff magically, there's nothing quite that simple. But what I wanted to show you today is kind of what the workflow looks like in Acourate. And then it's not a lot worse than this sort of one button thing that we're talking about to once you've got kind of your whole workflow set up. I'm going to skip past some of the kind of hardware bits. So things that we would have done before we get to the part that I'm going to talk about today. Of course, getting the room set up as well as it can be, putting room treatments in place or whatever else you need to kind of make sure. You can see I've got some acoustic panels behind my head here. Whatever you need to do to your room to make it sound as good as it possibly can. If you've got open windows or uncovered windows, I've got an uncovered window in front of me where you can see where the light's coming from, but that is shuttered when I'm playing music up here. So getting rid of those or covering up those hard reflective surfaces is going to help a lot, because they do affect the tone of the reverberant field in the room, and it's really difficult to do much to fix that with room correction. Anyway, so assuming that you've done all of that stuff, the other thing that I've done behind the scenes is record some sweeps. So what I do in this case, and I'll go through this in a lot more detail, is put a microphone where kind of in the center of where my ears would be in the sweet spot. And I remove any furniture that's kind of around that spot. So normally, I might have a chair or a table. I typically try to avoid having anything between my ears and the speakers, so that triangle doesn't have any furniture in it. Sometimes people have a glass coffee table or other things that are in the way that can affect the sound quite a bit. So remove everything from the that I normally might have in that area that could affect how the microphone picks up sound, because it's really difficult for the microphone to figure out what sound is coming directly from the speaker and what sound is bouncing off of a coffee table next to the speaker, or a coffee table or other piece of furniture that's in the path between that speaker and microphone. So we want to try to eliminate those. And sometimes it seems a little bit crazy, but if we can help the microphone to get as clean of a signal as it can, even though when we're listening to the system, those pieces of furniture in place, will still get better results because the signal is just easier for the microphone to pick up and process. So at this point, I've done all of that stuff as well, moved the furniture out of the way, put the microphone in the sweet spot, recorded a pair of sweeps, This also involves making some cable runs to the stereo system so that the output of my audio interface goes through there. But all of that stuff I'll cover in a ton more detail later on. I just wanted to let you know that there was some prep work that I did in advance of this. So with all of that done, let's go and I will launch Acourate. Here we go. The interface by 2020 standards is a little bare looking, but it's functional. There's Uli, he's the guy who put this stuff together in Germany. I have asked him to join us on a kind of interview call later on in this series. If I'm able to convince him to do that, then I'll have him explain some of the math behind convolution, and maybe answer some of your more technical questions that he's a lot more qualified to answer. Plus, it might be just kind of cool for you to meet him and for him to have an opportunity to chat with all of you. So, but this is the software. I'll just show you really quickly what kind of one of the original sweeps that I would have recorded looked like. So if I open this signal up, let's just look at the amplitude piece. You can see that like there's all kinds of craziness happening up in the high frequencies, and this is really normal for listening rooms. It can be a little bit discouraging. What it also means, though, is if you try to digitally correct for all these little ups and downs, it's kind of a fool's errand. Doing much correction really kind of above, you can see things start to get crazy around 300 hertz or so. Doing much correction above here, at least in any kind of fine detail, ends up being kind of a fool's errand. If you just move your head a quarter of an inch, you'll be in one of these peaks or troughs, and the correction just doesn't make sense. Hopefully I've explained that a little bit. So for amplitude correction, if we do corrections over high frequencies in the amplitude domain, we're going to do them in a very kind of soft way. Just sort of very broad ranges of frequencies, gentle boost or whatever, nothing detailed like what we see here. For high frequencies, we're mostly interested in correcting the time response rather than the amplitude response. So what we want to do, because there's typically a group delay, or for example, this frequency down here might arrive at our ears later than one of these frequencies up here, or this range of frequencies here. So what we want to do is be able to kind of contract that or address that time domain problem. So when we're doing corrections to high frequencies, we're not doing amplitude correction. We're really concerned about the phase or timing relationship between those higher frequencies and lower frequencies. And that's the only reason why we bother with full range correction. You can limit Roon's correction to just 200 or 300 hertz if you want to do that and not do anything to affect the high frequencies. So you have that flexibility. But you lose some of the time correction benefits that are really valuable. If we just correct the low frequencies, there's no way for us to kind of pull those high frequencies that are ahead in time back to be in line with the low frequencies. So I'm hoping I've not lost you. Ask questions if it doesn't make any sense. But I just wanted to show you what kind of one of these raw recordings looks like before we get busy with the workflow. So hang on a second. Good grief, I'm not showing you the right screen. Anyway, all right. Now that I'm showing you the right screen, I'll rewind a little bit so that you can see some of that stuff. Actually, let me exit out so we can get back to where we were. Let me do this part first. This is the challenge of running through all this stuff with two monitors that I don't always see what you're seeing. All right, so this is the first step in this workflow. If I was going to make a change to kind of the way my system sounds, let me clear all these things out. We've got curves all over the place. All right, let me jump out of here. So going through the workflow again real quick, I would start Acourate. I would do this amplitude preparation step, which is going to load my pulse file, and it's going to do a psychoacoustic smoothing of that file. That's one channel. We're going to run through the other channel. All right, so this is the amplitude response, kind of the native amplitude response of the speaker, as I sort of tried to describe, but you couldn't see it. There's not much, all that fuzzy stuff on the high frequencies are kind of faded away, and the bulk of the deviation, I guess, from flat, you would say, are in the lower frequencies. So we've done these this first step, this amplitude preparation. We'll go do target curve design, and I'll load from a file the curve, this sort of JBL synthesis shaped curve that I'm using. I'm going to save that target. And now I'm going to invert the native response over the correction curve, or target curve. We're just going to place a limit on any high frequency boosts. I don't think that's a problem with this case, but I just do it out of practice. This is what the inverted curve looks like. Now I'm going to go to the next step and do filter generation. And we'll talk in more detail about what some of these parameters are. I'll usually put a subsonic filter in that helps. I can explain more detail later, but that helps kind of keep the time domain response a little bit more predictable. Especially, and it tends to make them stay closer together. The time correction for the left channel and the right channel are more consistent in that case. All right, I don't have a particularly fast computer, as I mentioned before. This is just an old Core i3 computer from probably 8 years ago at least. Now we need to find out how we did. This last part is optional, but it's usually a good idea unless you've got a lot of experience running through this stuff, just to do a quick analysis of and prediction of the performance of the filter. You can see that we've made a small increase in this inter-aural coherence coefficient. Basically, this is just a fancy way of measuring how similar the left and the right channels are with each other. Usually expect to see these numbers go up a little bit as a result of the correction. If they go down, then that could mean that there's something not quite right with our design. Now, there are a few things that we're looking at here. If we take a look at this group delay curve, what we're interested in, we've got this enormous sort of group delay spike over a very narrow band of frequencies. But from what I've heard from Mitch Barnett and other folks that are experts in this stuff, if you have group delay, even big group delay below 100 hertz, it's not anything that you're going to be able to hear. The wavelengths are too long there for it to matter. So we don't really care about that very much. What we want to see is that the kind of group delay from 100 hertz and up is very, very flat, which it is in this case. Now let's take a look at the time domain. So this is what we call the step response. I'm just going to look at a little slice of it. Hang on. Zoom in. And what we want to see is not very much kind of pre-ringing here, and then a nice sharp aligned spike. And then we want to see the left and the right channels pretty consistent. So overall, it looks like this thing is pretty easy. So, looks pretty good. The final step that we'll do here is generate these filter curves. We'll call this my new test filter, whatever. We'll create a filter file that's compatible with Roon. So the software takes care of all of that stuff. Let's now jump over to Roon and import that filter. So we'll pick a zone, and I'm going to open up the DSP settings for that zone, and then there's this convolution filter. If you don't see convolution here, then when you click Add Filter, it'll be one of the options there. All right, so this allows us to kind of browse for a filter file. So essentially, you navigate to where that filter file is, and you select it and upload it. So, and it would just kind of show up here. And the other thing that you can do, once you do that, you can save this thing as a new preset. I might call it like release candidate 6 or whatever. The nice thing about having these presets here is that now, if I wanted to listen to what my system sounds like flat, you see convolutions disabled. I've put in a headroom management of minus 3.7 decibels to match up the kind of the sound pressure level of the flat filter with what I will hear after correction. So that when I'm comparing these two, the differences that I'm hearing are less to do with difference in how loud they are and more to do with the actual frequency response. And then I can switch to any one of these filters. If I look in the convolution tab, as I switch through these presets, this is like a version 4 of this zip file that I've created. And if I switch again, I see it's version 5 and so on and so forth. And so these presets allow you to kind of quickly switch between them. If I go to this headphones preset, just in case you're curious what that is, have convolutions turned off, but we have this crossfeed turned on, and I can apply these presets to any rooms that I want to. Now, obviously, these Acourate zones with Acourate convolution files in them are only applicable to this particular room. I could apply them someplace else, but they wouldn't really kind of help at all. Anyway, so that's basically the whole process. Again, it's really just running through these set of predefined macros. Once you've got your pulse recorded, most of the time I can run through this set if I'm not explaining it in about 5 or 10 minutes to update the filter set. So it's as close to a one-button click as I can think of. Once I run through these things, I create the zip file, I fire up Roon on here. You'll see if I try to run it now, it doesn't work because I'm screen sharing. But I'll fire up Roon, do the upload, and then I'm done. So really 5-10 minutes max, I'm able to regenerate these filters once I have a new set of sweep files. Really, the longest part is just pulling out the cables, connecting the microphone, and moving some furniture out of the way. So I hope that you found this helpful, now that you have an idea of what the overall process is. Sorry about some of the screen swap issues that I had before. But it should be now, at least you have an idea in your head of what the overall process is and start thinking about how you would implement this at home. Again, you can do filter correction or a correction curve that's just for sort of amplitude correction at those lower bass frequencies. That tends to be the problems that we have in the room most of the time. But correcting the full band in Roon allows you to be able to do time domain correction as well, which I think is, at least in my system, I think that's more valuable than the amplitude correction. And you may find that to be the case as well. Anyways, run on long enough. I hope this was helpful, and look forward to your questions and going from there.